I'm Micah.
And I'm Diana.
And we have a few things to discuss.
So today we have a very, very special episode, probably the most special one we've done so far, and we're going to be talking today about the Breaker Mission and about the Breaker book that is available now, and your story and kind of how all of this ties together, and the new mission, the new movement, the new ministry that the Lord has been calling you into and me as well. So I'm excited for today's talk.
I am too. It's been a long time coming. This will be the first time publicly that it goes out of, really what happened, what we went through, the healing behind it, God's mercy, God's grace, and now stepping into helping other men and women in their own healing.
Yeah. And, as we've thought about this episode, it was kind of one of the reasons we started this podcast to begin with was, we just wanted to be able to be the first ones. You wanted our show to be the first place that people really hear this story for the first time. So we are just praying for the Lord to come into this conversation and speak to the hearts that he needs to speak to, and just let the words that come out of our mouths be his in this time.
Yeah, it was important for me that when this was told, it was me and you.
Yeah.
And having a conversation much like this, because you've navigated a lot of this with me through the healing for sure, all the way through. I can't get emotional too soon at this, but and how important that was. And so I'm excited to open up about that and hopefully help change some hearts.
Yeah. So let's do it. So first off, what is the Breaker Mission?
So we have the book coming out. The Breaker Mission is essentially to help men who went through more than likely childhood traumas that are still living in that shame and that pain, and to find true freedom from the healing that is necessary from their childhood pain.
And why is that important to you?
It's important to me because my story is really the catalyst to the breaker, and being able to open that in a way that can be a strength for someone else. We're looked at as men as getting vulnerable as a weakness or silence as a strength, when vulnerability is actually the strength. Mm-hmm. Because with our voice and our story, we can help impact someone else's life. We're most perfectly positioned to help the person we once were. But I had to go down that same path and do the work necessary to be in a place to be able to speak into men about the same things that I went through. So when I was around the age of 5, I was introduced to an individual that my mom had known. It was just me and my mom growing up. I have a great relationship with my real father now, but at that time they were not together and whatnot. And so I was really looking for a male figure in my life. And my mom knew that. And so from the age of 5 to 15, although this man was here and being a great father figure type of individual and male mentor in my life, teaching me about Jesus and God and flying kites and fishing and whatnot, he also started the manipulation and the grooming. And I was horrifically sexually abused by him for 10 years. And it almost destroyed me. It almost killed me. And I held it for 3 decades, essentially, where I couldn't open up outside of you and a few others. I really believed that was going to go with me to the grave. Mm-hmm. I was never going to share. What I'll tell you, the men that are watching, the women that are watching, that have gone through something similar, you're going to understand exactly what I'm saying. When you go through something like that, there is such a level of shame that grips you in a way that makes it nearly impossible to ever say anything to anyone. I always say, as crazy and as over the top as this sounds, you would rather jump off a bridge than tell anyone. Mm-hmm. Because the judgment of others, the weakness that it would portray on a man. And, and I was just a vulnerable child, but it really messed me up. And I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol or any of that stuff because as a child I had witnessed a lot of abuse through those things. But I was smiling on the outside. Mm-hmm. No one knew. None of my friends. No one knew. But inside I felt like I was just drowning, like I was dying. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't want to talk to anyone. It was going to be locked into a safe so deep, and the key was going to be thrown away, and I was never going to go into that safe again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I was at that point.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful when you share just how that felt like to hold that in. And I would love for you to share a little bit of, you had that massive, massive shame, and it was like, I'm going to hold this in. I'm never going to tell anybody, but it still came out and it's like when that pain is locked away, it came out still. It just came in different forms. Depression, anxiety, panic attacks. Could you tell us a little bit about like that stifling, that silence, which a lot of people think, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It still comes out.
So age 15, the abuse had stopped at that particular point. I was now in a much safer place. He was no longer in my life. And anxiety and depression started manifesting. So when you have this shame internally that you're holding on to, these things that are so painful and you don't know how to deal with it, what your body does is it manifests things. Sometimes we turn to alcohol or drugs to try to just coat that pain. We put on different Band-Aids to try to cover the scars that are there. For me, it came out in the form of really bad panic attacks and anxiety, to the point I was always a good student. I was a good kid. Me and my mom had some friction, but I was a good kid at school. I was an athlete, and it literally it destroyed me. I couldn't go to school. I had lost everything. I was a 3.0 student. And I couldn't even sit in class. I'm having panic attacks, thinking that someone was going to find out. My body started responding in uncontrollable ways. When that starts happening, you start having dark thoughts of like, I don't even want to live. And by the grace of God, like he's just telling me just one more day, and like I'd wake up and I'd just try to do it again and put my smile on and hang out with my friends and everything else. But inside I was just like dying. And when you start having panic attacks and you start having depression like that, I started like, I couldn't even go on the bus with like my sports team. So I had to quit sports, anything that was in high school, any of the sports that required me to go on a bus, because I lost control. Because when you get abused like that, the one thing you want back is safety and control. So I couldn't be in a car unless I was driving. I couldn't go to a movie theater unless I was on the end of a row. Like anything that could potentially confine me from being able to have control, I wouldn't do. And so unfortunately I had to give up everything and all my potential dreams at that point in my life. My home life was not stable. And so I was not really in the safest of homes to heal the way that I needed to, nor was I in a position to even want to open up about it. There is a societal stigma with men in general. It's just the thought of it, and I mentioned this before, the thought of it, it's impossible. It feels impossible. It's not impossible, but it feels impossible. Mm-hmm. I do believe it's the devil's number one grip on men. specifically, because we can talk alcohol and drugs and everything else, but it's deeper. It's the shame. And it more than likely started in childhood. Something happened, sexual abuse, physical abuse, something happened. And that boy ended up having to go into survival mode way too young in his life. And he's never been able to heal from that. And that was me. And although, I had turned to some positive things for healing, which we can talk about, I was internally just struggling.
Yeah. That
word doesn't even give it enough. Like I was barely breathing.
Yeah. I think drowning is a word that we used in the book that just like that, almost like suffocating, like something is just dragging you down no matter how hard you're trying to get to the top of the water to breathe. It's like this weight that is just dragging you down.
Yeah, I got pretty emotional a little bit ago, and I don't get emotional due to the things I went through because of the healing that I did. I get emotional because I think about how many men are still suffering the way I was.
Yeah.
And it puts a fire, like God has put a fire in me that is like, so I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And when we understand the statistics of it, because I think a lot of people out there, because it's just a topic and a subject that really is still kind of just, it's not talked about a lot. And I get it, because it's one of those very shameful things for men that it's like, and God has been very clear. He's like, I need you to be a voice in a space that just has not been tapped as well as it should be. And we need to lead this and actually have a mission behind it and whatnot. And, and that's where the Breaker comes in. And so, I just remember thinking, when God gave me the first vision and you were at that concert with me, my first reaction was just like, I can't do this.
You'll have to share what that vision was.
So we're at a Carrie Job concert. Some friends had invited us to a Carrie Job concert, and this song Forever comes on, and she is belting. She's right at the peak of this song. The ground began to shake. The stone is rolled away, and it's essentially a song about Christ's resurrection. And I just start weeping uncontrollably, like to a point like I don't do that, like at that level. And I feel the presence of the Holy Spirit on me, like super heavy, like more than I had ever gotten. And God has always used like visions for me in showing me specific things. And so the first one was to go see our kids in Haiti. The second vision was something that I was like, I can't do that. And the vision was, I was on a stage sharing my story publicly, this specific story about the sexual abuse publicly, in front of a whole bunch of people that I didn't know. My biggest fear in the world, the one thing that I can't do, there's no way I'm doing that. And I remember fighting with the Lord. I had talked to you about it afterwards and told you the visions, but I was really fighting with the Lord. Like, how am I going to navigate this? How do I even go through this? Where am I supposed to turn to? I don't want to go to a counselor because I had some trauma from counseling stuff. And so I'm like, how are you going to navigate me through this? You're going to have to navigate me. And I'm resistant too. and slowly but surely, over a course of 7 years, that healing took place, which we share in the book in detail on how I did just that and how God navigated me through that. And then obviously the vision came to life at a conference that we held.
Yeah, which was incredible. I want to go back though just a little bit because I don't want to skip over some of these pieces that are really important for men to hear. As we've kind of, over this last it's been about 8 years now since that vision you had at the Carrie Job concert and the healing journey that's taken place. But we've learned so much more about how much men are struggling, and even the statistics that say, oh, it's 1 in 6 men. But then the the fact of the matter is that it's something like 75% of men that something has happened, whether it was a one-time occurrence or something that happened over repeated years, like what happened to you, or levels of severity may be different, but the impact, the shame level, the shame is really across the board. Just has such a grip that it was like 75%, I think, of men never say anything and take it to their grave. But that doesn't mean that pain and that wound doesn't come out in their lives in some way. And just through the research we've done, and just with our friends over at Arizona Trauma Institute and just various other resources, it's addiction, it's pornography, it's anger, it's broken relationships, it's so many of these things are rooted, a lot of them in a lot is actually sexual abuse, or it could be physical abuse, it could be neglect, it could be some of those other types of traumas that men have not gone in and worked on and healed and gone through some level of a healing process to get free from that, so they're not looking for those things to fill them up. And so I just wanted to stay there a little bit more of how big of an issue this actually is, and your opinion on the 1 in 6 and what we're thinking there.
So the more research that we've done, we've learned these. So they have these stats out there. It's men, it's 1 in 6. Women, it's 1 in 4. I don't think that that's accurate for men. I don't believe it's accurate for men. I think it's worse. Mm-hmm. And we're talking at least a one-time occurrence that it happened, whether it be in a situation like me, that it was an adult who had done it, or another child had done it, or someone, a little bit older than, like there is so much abuse happening mm-hmm. in so many ways, and so many people trying to live in silence with that. Yeah. And so what we know is it takes 21 years on average for a man to disclose it. 21 years on average, 28 years to actually go into detail. But that's only the men that actually share, which is 75+%, they believe, never share a word. So they either die from it or with it, mm-hmm. And when I say they die from it, they've already turned to alcohol or drugs or something that is totally destructive. Because it manifests. Food is another one. It manifests in a way, there is no way around it. That shame will be revealed in some sort of capacity. It was revealed in me in multiple different types of ways. I didn't turn to those things, but I did turn to other things. And so it will come out. So I step on stage, I share my story, one of the most freeing moments of my life. But what happened afterward was the most impact. Mm-hmm. And we had a room full of people, and 10% of the audience came up afterwards, men, women, to just let me know that they had gone through something similar. Mm-hmm.
And some of them they were people that had not
never
actually shared before.
Yeah. There's husbands out there, there's brothers, there's fathers out there that have not told their spouses, that have not told the people they love because of the fear that they think that their wife or their sister or their friend may think that they're weak. I get that. I understand that. But what I'll tell you is your loved ones also know more than likely that you're suffering in some sort of capacity. That you may be going through something, but they don't know because you just don't open up at all about what's going on. And so, when we dive into the book and so many details about that, not only from my perspective as someone who had gone through it, but also Diana's, your perspective of being the spouse of someone that was going through it. Mm-hmm. And that it's a really powerful piece with that. But those men out there that are just going through the fact of, I can't share, where do I even start? All those questions that we start asking ourselves, what I'll tell you is you were never meant to hold that weight. Yeah. And when you get on the other side of it, and it will happen if you do the work. It will happen if you do the work. You get on the other side of it, it's like climbing a mountain without 200 pounds on your back. I mean, it is such a freeing thing. We go into massive detail in all of those, but it takes a tremendous amount of work. It takes courage. and bravery to do that. It takes vulnerability to do that, a community to do that. If not a full community, at least an individual that loves you and by your side. You can't do it alone. But I just encourage those out there that are going through what I went through to get the help needed.
Let's talk a little bit more about why it's so hard for men to share too. Because I think for a lot of women that are listening, and it's not that every woman shares either. There's a lot of women that have gone through things, but we've just learned like it's harder for men to share just because of some specific things, like some specific fears, how our bodies are designed to have arousal with certain things. And so a lot of men will feel shame if their body responded in certain ways to things. I think it's not fun to talk about stuff, but I think that's one of the pieces that holds men in such shame, is not understanding that it was a violation of the God designed men's bodies and women's specifically. And this was a violation against that. Even though their body may have responded in what would have been a normal way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know it's like not the most comfortable thing to talk about, but I think it's important for men to understand and for women to understand why it's so hard for men to share.
The first thing that I would like to say is it wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
You were a child. Mm-hmm. Someone took advantage of you in a really horrific way. Mm-hmm. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
Shame, and I mentioned this before, shame is one of the most difficult things. I think it is number one. Mm-hmm. As we were going through all the research, all my own healing, all the things that I continued hearing over and over and over from past people who had gone through something similar is that shame just grips you in a way. And again, I think some of it has to do with just this societal stigma that is on men, that it's like boys don't cry, the vulnerability is weakness, the thought of it being released. And I remember for my own self, I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get a girlfriend. I'm always just going to be the boy that was abused. I'm going to be less than. Mm-hmm. I felt that way internally anyways, so I had to create disassociation, which we know in abuse world of just like, I had to create this alter reality for survival during that time. And as a child, someone who's gone through that, it's a very common thing to do, but then we just keep carrying that on forever. We're not supposed to hold that forever. But shame gets in and it puts just like almost like a straitjacket on your ability to continue growing in a way. Like you're growing physically and you become a man, but you're still internally trying to protect the 7-year-old little boy that was hurt.
Yeah. So, and it's even like why it's harder for men than for women is a lot to do just with, like, I've heard it's not just men that abuse men either. Like there's women that have abused young boys too. And so I was listening to, or something I was reading was talking about how it's like if it's a woman that did something to a boy and their body responded, it's like, oh, well, that was okay because look, your body responded to it. And so I think that's one of the biggest pieces for men, specifically with the shame, why there's so much shame is because often their body did do some type of response. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's what, like Candace from Arizona Trauma Institute, that was one thing she was sharing is like, that is one of the big pieces for men, why it's so hard, that the shame is so deep, is because of almost just like a biological, how their bodies were designed.
And the flip side to that, if it did happen from a female, society almost like praises that.
Yeah. And
it's like, oh, he got to hook up with an older woman.
Yeah.
And like, it's so wrong. Like if you're a child and an adult takes advantage of you, or another child, like any abuse is bad. But if an adult is taking advantage of you in a way like that, like it is not all right.
Yeah.
It is not okay. That's a child. That child should be protected by all means. And so, that's the other, it's like we're fighting this stigma. And this is something that I'm feeling very called to, like, the way to break this stigma is get enough people to be behind the fact that it is not okay.
Yeah.
And enough men to stand up strong and go, hey, I went through this too. And I went through healing and helping other men. And like that's really how I believe that this will happen.
Yeah. And I think that's just, it's all of those things that we've heard is like the fear of I'm going to be seen as not masculine. I'm going to be seen as weak. I'm going to be seen as less of a man. I'm going to not be believed because I'm a man. So all of those things. And it's like trying to just break through of like, you're not less masculine. If something like that happened to you, you are not less masculine. You are not less of a man. You are not weak. You were exploited. You were taken advantage of, and you were harmed in ways that you should not have been harmed.
Yeah, you didn't deserve what you went through. Mm-hmm. I held so much shame and some guilt for other reasons. Not from something that I did to someone else or whatnot, but that as a child thinking that I could protect others when I was a child. But what I'll tell you is my abuser actually got caught, which is really rare. Mm-hmm. And my abuser actually went to prison and spent time in prison because he had abused so many children.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there that are still walking and living in that, and then these men out there that were once boys, obviously, that were hurt.
Yeah. And the other piece of that is another reason why a lot of people don't share is because so often abuse is someone that is within the family or very close to the family. Yeah. So it's actually not very common for an abuser to be someone that like nobody knows. And so that's the other thing is just being able to cover up. And then also another piece of your story that we'll just touch on because we're going to do another whole episode about just how you came out of all of this. But yours actually happened in the church, which should be a safe place, but it was a man who was claiming that he was a believer and doing all of these things within the church, and so that he could get easy access to children and putting this portrayal of himself out there. And so it's the other part of your story is how you were hurt in this place by this, which should have been safe, someone who was using the name of the Lord in vain to manipulate and harm. And then, it's going to be an interesting story of how your eyes actually came back to relationship with the Lord and understanding that that was not him and that was actually literally the enemy and the opposite of God.
That was a very difficult extra layer that I had to go through. Mm-hmm. And we'll get in deep with that, but I had learned a lot of my faith in Christ and God when I was very young. And this same man that was abusing me was also teaching me mm-hmm. about God and Jesus and whatnot. And so to have that extra layer, I remember reaching out to God when I knew what was going on was horrible and I started going downhill. And just praying out to him and going, please protect me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't hear from him. And the abuse kept happening. And so at age 15, which is a pivotal part of the story, I stepped away. I turned my head away from the Lord. Just like I'm being abused and then you want me to read the Bible and you want And, but as God talks, he can turn what was meant for evil to good. And the rest of the story later in the story ends up being about renewal and hope and healing and anointing and being able to help others because of it. But that spiritual trauma is a very difficult thing to navigate, mm-hmm. especially if the spiritual was used in a way to hurt someone that is very vulnerable.
Yeah. So there was, I just wanted to make sure we touched on that, just to understand that there was sexual abuse, there was a lot of emotional abuse that was happening, there was a spiritual abuse that was happening, and just the deep layers, like just you understand firsthand how deep that pain can go. And the breaker, as we share this story, a lot of people that have gone through maybe not the exact same thing as you, but have gone through pains and things that have not been healed, they may use some tools that end up getting them to a place of pain management, pain tolerance, so that they can function in this world. But this really is going to be a book about hope. And so as we will kind of wrap up this first episode of talking about your story, but just thank you for your vulnerability and thank you for opening up. We're going to do a part 2 where then we're going to actually step into the hope of this story and the tools and the lifelines that God sent you that actually navigated you and helped you in that healing process over the years. But thank you for sharing. I'm very proud of you.
I love you.
So
we have a few things to discuss.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and please watch part 2 as we just step into the hope of this story and share a little bit more about the Breaker Mission. But thank you for being with us for this very special episode of A Few Things, and we will see you again next time.